A code written into law on December 19th, 1914, is systematically dismantling the largest agricultural economy in the United States. Not a virus, not a market crash, a legal hierarchy. As of this year, farmers across California's San Joaquin Valley are receiving official notices, curtailment orders. Their water is being shut off, while just across a dirt road, a neighboring farm with a different legal designation continues to irrigate, its sprinklers throwing arcs of water against the dust. The difference is not the crop. It is not the need. It is a single date on a piece of paper filed over a century ago. One farm holds a post-1914 appropriative water right. The other holds a pre-1914 senior right. One is junior. The other is senior. One survives the drought. The other turns to follow Earth. This is not a hypothetical scenario. This is the operating system of California water. An invisible architecture of power that is now determining who goes bankrupt and who gets a harvest. And the numbers are staggering. The Public Policy Institute of California estimates that by 2040, between 500,000 and 900,000 acres of productive farmland will have to be permanently taken out of production to balance the state's water budget. An area roughly the size of Rhode Island turned from green to brown. The question is no longer if this will happen. It is who will be first. To understand the crisis unfolding in 2026, you have to understand the two contracts that govern every drop of water in the state. One was written by California for itself, a system of winners and losers based on the year your ancestors staked a claim. The other was an interstate gamble on a river that is now failing, a deal where California holds the trump card. Both are now colliding with a future that has no water left to give. Zoom out, and the map of California is a paradox, a geographic mismatch of supply and demand. 75% of the state's precipitation falls north of Sacramento. 80% of the demand is south of it. To solve this, 20th century engineers built the two largest water-moving systems in human history, the State Water Project and the Federal Central Valley Project, a concrete circulatory system of dams, pumps, and aqueducts designed to move winter snowmelt from the Sierra Nevada mountains to the farms and cities hundreds of miles away. But that system was built on a stable climate that no longer exists. A severe snowpack collapse in March of 2026, where an extreme heat dome melted the state's frozen reservoir at a rate of 1% per day, proved that. The slow release of summer water the state depends on vanished in weeks. So when the aqueducts run low, the state turns to its law books. And California's surface water law is brutal in its simplicity. First in time, first in right. It is a doctrine left over from the chaos of the gold rush, when miners needed a way to divert streams to their claims. The first person to put the water to beneficial use established their right. Everyone who came after was junior to them. The system was formalized by the Water Commission Act, which took effect on December 19th, 1914. That date sliced California's water history in two. Anyone with a water right established before that day holds a senior, pre-1914 right. They are the top of the pyramid. Anyone with a right established after is a junior post-1914 appropriator. They are at the bottom. And there is one other group, riparian rights holders, landowners whose property is physically adjacent to a stream or river. They, along with the pre-1914 seniors, form the most protected class of water users in the entire state. During a drought, the State Water Resources Control Board, the state's powerful water regulator, chaired by Joaquin Esquivel, begins issuing curtailment orders. They start at the bottom. All post-1914 rights are cut off, sometimes for months, sometimes for the entire season. Only when all the junior rights holders are reduced to zero does the state ask the senior riparian and pre-1914 users to begin sharing the pain, reducing their usage proportionally. In a state built on innovation and progress, survival can come down to whether your great-grandfather filed paperwork before the start of World War I. But here is the detail that reveals the true pressure on the system. All of this history, all of this legal hierarchy, only applies to the water that originates inside California. For decades, the state has relied on a massive external safety net, an entire second supply, the Colorado River. And that river is in a state of collapse. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, is sitting at just 34% capacity. Lake Powell, its upstream sister, is even lower, at 26%. For 75 years, these reservoirs acted as massive savings accounts, buffering the Southwest against dry years. Now they are nearly empty. The reason is a fundamental error made in 1922. When the 7 basin states signed the Colorado River Compact, they divided up the water based on flow data from an unusually wet period. They legally allocated 15 million acre-feet of water per year between the upper and lower basins. The problem is, modern hydrology shows the river's average flow is closer to 12 or 13 million acre-feet. They divided up water that simply does not exist. A structural deficit that has been slowly draining the system for decades. Now, a critical deadline looms. The 2007 interim guidelines, the rules that have governed river shortages for the last 2 decades, expire on December 31st, 2026. The 7 states, California, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico, have been locked in brutal negotiations, unable to agree on a new plan. The Bureau of Reclamation, the federal agency that manages the dams, has made it clear that if the states cannot agree, the federal government will be forced to impose its own cuts. And this is where California's second legal advantage comes into play, the one that no one in Arizona or Nevada likes to talk about. In 1968, Congress passed the Colorado River Basin Project Act. It was legislation that authorized federal funding for a massive infrastructure project Arizona desperately wanted, the Central Arizona Project, or CAP, a 336-mile-long aqueduct to carry Colorado River water to Phoenix and Tucson. But to get the federal money, Arizona had to agree to a political compromise, a poison pill inserted into the law to protect California. The act legally subordinated the brand new Central Arizona project to California's existing water allocation. In the event of a shortage, the brand new multi-billion-dollar Arizona Canal would go dry before California had to give up a single drop of its core 4.4 million acre-foot apportionment. J. B. Hamby, California's current Colorado River Commissioner, is the man tasked with defending that 1968 deal. He is the state's lead negotiator in the tense post-2026 talks. In a February 2026 press release, he struck a diplomatic tone, stating, "California has a history of working collaboratively across the basin. We remain committed to using our experience to forge a plan that is sustainable." But behind the scenes, the fight is anything but collaborative. Shanti Rossett, a policy manager for Southern California's powerful Metropolitan Water District, called the post-2026 negotiations a fundamental reset of how the system may be operated going forward. The other states see this as their one chance to erase California's legal supremacy. California sees it as an existential defense of rights it was promised. So while the states battle over the future, the river itself is delivering the verdict. Lake Mead continues to fall. California, with its senior rights, has been largely shielded from the most painful cuts that Arizona and Nevada have already been forced to take. But even California's invincibility has a limit. The sheer lack of physical water in the river is now threatening to override the legal fine print. When a reservoir approaches dead pool, the point at which water can no longer flow past the dam, a piece of paper signed in 1968 becomes meaningless. The water is simply not there. The external safety net is tearing. And that is forcing California to finally confront the crisis it created for itself. The one happening invisibly, underground, for a century, California's water story was about surface water. Rivers, aqueducts, snow. When those ran dry, farmers turned to the only resource that was unregulated: groundwater. They began drilling wells, thousands of them, deeper and deeper. For decades, they pumped with no oversight, no limits, treating the vast aquifers beneath the Central Valley like an infinite bank account. It was a silent boom that kept the agricultural economy humming even when the canals were empty. But it came at a terrifying cost. The ground itself began to sink. As water was pumped out of the subterranean clay and sand layers, the earth compacted. This is not a slow, gentle settling. It is a phenomenon called land subsidence. In some parts of the San Joaquin Valley, the ground has sunk by 28 feet, enough to swallow a 2-story building. This subsidence is not just a curiosity. It is a disaster for the state's water infrastructure. The California Aqueduct, the main artery of the state water project, was engineered with a precise, gentle slope to move water via gravity. As the land beneath it sinks unevenly, the concrete canal cracks. Its capacity is reduced. The very infrastructure built to solve California's water problems is being broken by the response to those problems. The state was destroying its own plumbing. By 2014, the situation was so dire that Governor Jerry Brown did something once considered politically impossible. He signed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, ORSGMA. It was a legislative earthquake. For the first time in state history, groundwater pumping would be regulated. The law set a hard deadline. Basins designated as critically overdrafted, the worst offenders, must achieve complete sustainability by 2040. All other high and medium priority basins have until 2042. Sustainability means that no more water can be pumped out of the ground than is replenished by rain and surface water. The century-long overdraft had to end. Now, here is the part nobody is putting on the news. The sheer mathematical reality of what CMA means for the San Joaquin Valley. This region, the southern half of California's agricultural heartland, is home to 8 of the state's 21 critically overdrafted subbasins. It is ground zero for the cuts. To balance the water budget, the PIT calculates that agricultural water use in the valley must be reduced by 2.7 million acre-feet per year. That is more than double what all 4 million residents of the city of Los Angeles use in a year. There is no plausible way to achieve that reduction without taking land out of production. Permanently, this is the origin of the 500 to 900,000 acre fallowing number. It is not a worst-case scenario. It is the baked-in consequence of SGMA, and it is happening right now. In 2026, groundwater sustainability agencies across the valley are implementing their plans. Allocations are being slashed. In parts of the Turlock-Subason, farmers have been given a pumping limit of just 1.6 acre-feet per acre for the year. But a thirsty, high-value crop like almonds requires 3 to 4 acre-feet of water per year to survive. A farmer with an almond orchard and a 1.6 acre-foot allocation is facing a simple choice: watch his multi-million-dollar trees wither and die, or cut them down himself. Across the valley, the sound of chainsaws is becoming more common than the hum of irrigation pumps. Stacy Ann Silva, a principal at the water consulting firm Altum Aqualogic, commented on this in June 2026. "We are truly in the difficult part of CEMA," she said. "As allocations continue to ramp down, landowners are going to have to make tough decisions. Those tough decisions involve bulldozing orchards that were meant to be productive for another 15 years. It involves selling land at a loss to organizations that will convert it to habitat or solar farms. It means the end of multi-generational family farms. SGMA is a slow-motion economic catastrophe, purposefully implemented to avert a faster, more absolute environmental one. And it operates on a completely different legal track than the surface water rights system. A farmer could have senior pre-1914 rights to river water, but if that is not enough and he needs to pump groundwater, he is subject to the same schema allocation as his junior rights neighbor. It is a second layer of regulation, a second filter determining survival. This agricultural cataclysm is unfolding at the same time a common narrative persists. The myth that agriculture uses 80% of California's water, and if we just stopped growing almonds, the problem would be solved. The reality is more complex. The true breakdown of California's managed water, according to the PIC, is roughly 50% for the environment, 40% for agriculture, and 10% for urban use. The 80% figure comes from looking only at the 50% of water diverted for human use. Agriculture does use about 80% of that portion, but the other half is not optional. That 50% for the environment is legally mandated. It is the water required to flow through the state's rivers to maintain habitats for endangered species, like Delta smelt and Chinook salmon. It is the water needed to push out salt water from the Pacific Ocean, preventing it from intruding into the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta and contaminating the water supply for 27 million people. On July the 1st, 2026, the Department of Water Resources, under its director, Carla Nemeth, officially shifted the state water project into summer operations. This move, which sounds technical, means the massive pumps in the South Delta can run at a much higher capacity, precisely because the threatened fish have finished their migration past the machinery. The entire system is a constant, delicate negotiation between ecological limits and human thirst. Eliminating the environmental water share is not an option. It would mean the functional collapse of the Delta ecosystem and the poisoning of a major freshwater source. So the state cannot manufacture more water from the environmental slice. It cannot depend on the collapsing Colorado River. And it is legally required to stop over pumping its own groundwater. That leaves only one remaining target for savings: the 10% used by cities. Effective January 1st, 2025, a sweeping new regulation called Making Conservation a California Way of Life went into effect. Spearheaded by the Star CB, it is the state's most aggressive push for urban water efficiency ever. But it does not work the way many people think. The state is not sending water cops to fine you for taking a long shower. The regulation applies to the state's 400-plus urban retail water suppliers. Each supplier is given a unique annual water use budget, a target based on their local conditions, factoring in population, climate, and the density of residential landscapes. If a supplier fails to meet its budget, the state can fine the supplier, which may then pass those costs on to customers through higher rates. Throughout 2026, these water suppliers have been submitting their first round of compliance data. The goal is to collectively reduce statewide urban water use by 400,000 acre-feet by the year 2030. It is an ambitious and necessary goal, but it is crucial to see it in scale. The state is fighting to save 400,000 acre-feet in the cities over the next 4 years. In the San Joaquin Valley, agriculture is being forced to give up 2.7 million acre-feet. Annually, the urban conservation effort, while vital, is a fraction of the agricultural sacrifice. It shows where the true pain of California's water reckoning is being felt. Not on the green lawns of Beverly Hills, but in the dusty fields outside Fresno. And then there is the existential question, buried in the state's own planning documents. Governor Gavin Newsom's 2022 water supply strategy and the work of his Secretary for Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, are focused on a future of climate volatility. They are pushing to fast-track controversial new infrastructure, like the Delta Conveyance Project, a massive tunnel to move water under the fragile delta instead of through it. Legislation, like SB 872, is allocating $300 million a year just to repair the sinking aqueducts and aging delta levees, all while scientists in July 2026 began monitoring conditions for a potential mega El Niño later in the year, a weather event that could bring catastrophic floods to a state obsessed with drought, highlighting the wild swings between extremes that now define California's climate. The state is scrambling to build, to legislate, to conserve its way out of a problem that is fundamentally mathematical. There are more rights to water on paper than there is physical water in the system. the paper water of the Colorado River Compact, the stacked hierarchy of pre- and post-1914 rights, the unwritten check of a century of groundwater pumping. The bill for all of it is now coming due. The state's response is to enforce the fine print of its oldest laws while simultaneously writing new ones that condemn 1 million acres of its own economy. A pre-1914 water right is a shield against the curtailment of surface water. But it is no defense against a schema allocation that chokes your well. A senior right on the Colorado River is a powerful weapon in interstate negotiations, but it cannot make rain fall over Lake Mead. Every angle of the crisis leads back to the same brutal triage. Someone has to lose. The post-1914 junior rights holders are the first to have their surface water cut off. The farmers in the critically overdrafted basins of the San Joaquin Valley are the first to have their wells capped. The states of Arizona and Nevada are the first to see their Colorado River deliveries plummet. California has structured its legal reality to ensure that, in almost every scenario, it is not the first to feel the pain. It has built a fortress of legal seniority. But the siege is now coming from all sides at once. From the sky, which no longer delivers reliable snow. From the east, where a great river is drying up. And from below, where the aquifers are reaching their limits. The system is working exactly as it was designed. Seniority is being honored. But it was a system designed for a world that no longer exists. A climate that has vanished. The water that fell as snow in the Sierra Nevada last February is right now flowing through the arteries of the State Water Project. It is filling reservoirs south of the Delta, being routed to irrigation districts based on a pecking order established when the world was at war. For some, it is life. For others, it is a reminder of what they have lost. The satellite images are changing, patch by patch. The transition is underway. 3 questions will define the next decade of California's existence. When the state forces nearly 1 million acres of its most productive farmland to go dry, what happens to the communities and the people who depend on that land for their survival? If the Colorado River crisis deepens to the point where Lake Mead reaches dead pool, rendering all legal seniority moot, who decides how the last remaining drops are divided? And what does it mean to live in a modern megastate of 40 million people whose entire existence is governed by a set of water rules based on a 19th century gold rush and a 20th century drought that everyone now agrees was a historical anomaly? The water from the spring 2026 snowmelt is now less than 100 days from the taps of Los Angeles. For some farmers in the San Joaquin Valley, that same water might as well be on Mars. It is legally present in the canal just a few miles away, but it does not belong to them. It belongs to a right holder with a date on a document. Their land, which was green last year, will be brown by fall. The wells are already being measured. The allocations are already set. And the sound of orchards being ripped from the ground is the sound of California's water future arriving.